Hello, this is Charles Folkart, January 4th, 2017. Welcome, especially to all you new subscribers and any new viewers, and even those who haven't subscribed and yet have viewed these videos before. I've got some very, very interesting information to pass on to you. I'm putting this image up on the screen here so that you get the globe, the spinning sphere, heliocentric model out of your mind for a while, and just open your mind up a little bit and just be open to the idea that what we've been told is not the truth, and that maybe the Earth isn't a spinning sphere, and that it actually looks like this image on the screen. And also I've included, and the reason you want to keep this image in mind is because I've got two interviews here. They're kind of lengthy. I don't know, they're about 15 minutes each, maybe a little longer, but I intend to do a follow-up on this subject of the Antarctica and the Earth, the conception that we have of the Earth. But I think you'll need to watch these two interviews. One was conducted here just the other day with Clif High by Greg Hunter. I sent Greg a private a private message, and I never heard back from him, so I'm just going to go ahead and record this, and he's the one that does the interview, as you'll see. And also one that, if you haven't seen it, in the 50s, I believe it was, maybe the late 40s, with Admiral Byrd. And I'm not going to make any comments other than this, except I want you to also look at this. We're here in Ephesians chapter 4, and you know, a lot of people I talk to and a lot of people I see on the internet, and this has been going on all my life, they mock the Bible. They say the Bible is not a science book, and there's a lot of error in there, and who believed the earth was flat and the sun was created on the fourth day, etc., etc. But anyway, I'm going to go into this on the next video, and that's why it's important for you, in order to understand the next video, you've got to have this background, I believe. And Ephesians 4:8, wherefore he saith, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. Now that he ascended, what is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? He that descended, the same also that ascended up far above all heavens, that he might fill all things. Right here's the part I want to emphasize. He descended first into the lower parts of the earth. And I'm going to hopefully show in the next video how leaders in the scientific world, in the scientific field, found their insight first in the scripture. And even though the powers that be would mock the Bible, I believe they used the Bible to further expand on what is revealed in the scripture. And I hope to get into that in the next video. But as I said, you'll have to watch this video first to get a background. You know, when you build a building of any kind, you have to lay the foundation first, and the foundation has to be plumb level and square, or the building that you build on the foundation will not hold up, or it will be it won't be a good building. So I like to lay the foundation first, and that's why this video is important. So let's go on to the interview by Greg Hunter of Clif High He does the bot report. I'll put a link below this video to his webpage. I think I'm going to buy his report. And then also the interview that follows is the one with Richard Byrd, I believe you pronounce it, in I think the 1940s. Anyway, enjoy, and I will see you on the next video.
The Dow.
And hold on, just before I go on, there's all this talk about, oh, gold's going to go down to $600 an ounce or $300 an ounce, and there's very, very dire predictions about how it goes way off. You're not seeing that. You're not seeing a big crash in the gold. You're saying this is probably the bottom right here.
No, I don't see. There's the rub, guy. The way I built my system, I was really pig ignorant, and I never even looked for things like shorting opportunities. So I never really tried to follow the downward trend. I was only interested in stocks that were going to go up, and I was going to buy.
Okay.
So my system has a couple of blind spots built into it. But in that regard, though, there's stuff showing that an ounce of gold is going to be able to buy the Dow, and that will occur sometime after the autumnal equinox, or near that period of time. Now, we also have other stuff at that point suggesting that the Dow might well be 125,000 US dollars to purchase it, whatever it is composed of. So, they may change the different companies in there, and there's all different kinds of strange stuff relative to the layout of our economy and what's going on at this deep, dark, what we call woo-woo level. The woo-woo is all of the officially denied, unknown UFOs, strange, spooky stuff humans can't explain that does not come up in the academic paradigm. And I'm suggesting very strongly with this very large report. I mean, we ran a lot of extra pages in this report, even with the ones I had to cut out. But I'm suggesting very strongly that from 2017 onward, that our friend, mutual friend here, Bill Holter, I think his truth bombs are going to start coming on out. And it's not going to be limited to just the economy. And so we're going to get something that we can describe in a loose way as disclosure that woo-woo is moving into a more dominant consciousness or awareness in our consciousness period from this point onward. And so
in other words, aliens are real.
Oh, that's old news.
Okay, all right.
I mean, that is so prosaic.
Okay.
As to be, not.
In other words, aliens are controlling us in some way. How about that?
Sure. Yeah. That and it may even be stranger than that. Where and a lot of this stuff is going to come out of what we're calling the discovery, simply because it's going to make such a huge difference to humanity over these next 30, 40, 50 years. In our reports, it's describing a world that we don't actually live in right at this moment, but that we're transitioning into. If accurate, if these predictions are accurate, they appear to be developing that way, especially around those things that are not manipulated. The actual appearance of climate, weather, the appearance of new property, new lands rising, all of these are forecast. The rain bombs, the lakes and rivers in the sky that suddenly dump out on us, the sudden freezing of whole herds of animals, all these things were forecast years before they occurred within our data sets and described. Now, following that same woo-woo trend of basically science fiction, and that's what we called this report, was Sci-Fi World, because we're going to be getting into a world in which the past expectations of even things like physics or weather or climate cannot be relied upon to be persistent into the future. And so our future is going to involve a re-looking at a human history that'll go back 7,000 years, that's going to upset a lot of people whose thinking is so rigid that they're not going to be able to accept the developing reality around them. And we also are suggesting that a lot of this is going to come from this discovery that has already occurred in Antarctica, probably occurred 20 years ago, and we're just now going to start hearing about it over these next few years. We now have physical, political, economic evidence that a lot of our forecasts about Antarctica. Now, bear in mind something that I need to point out. When I first started my reports, the very first run I ever did, focusing in on trying to make money on the stock market, two things came up that absolutely shocked me. One of them was the sun, the big scary ball in the sky. The other was Antarctica. It was all through, both of those were all through that first data set. And from that point on, I was so intrigued, I forgot about the stock market stuff and went out in the woo-woo world. But now we're getting to the point where the data is saying woo-woo is going to start kicking ass and taking names. It's going to start dominating, that we're going to start seeing the real information about where our trillions of missing dollars are slowly percolate out. We're going to see new inventions pouring out all over the place as they've been officially allowed to, because we need them now. And a lot of this is going to pivot around whatever it is that's been discovered in Antarctica. And I think the giant pyramids that are 3 and 4 times the size, and in one case maybe 20 times the size of the largest pyramid in the Giza Plateau, I think these pyramids in Antarctica contain stuff that's going to tell us a lot more real information about our history than we could ever imagine. And I also think these pyramids go back to the other half of this precessional cycle, and maybe all the way even through it. So at least in the order of 12,000, if not 21,000 years. And so our ideas of who we are, how we came to be, and what we need to be thinking about as humans are actually involved in this report in a way I never anticipated. Let me also state that when I go into doing the interpretation in these reports, I don't really have a clue as to what we're going to be looking at other than those dominant sets that may have appeared in previous reports. So I go to look to see what's happening in USA POP, but it can change from month to month to month. We also had this weird situation develop in our work here that took about 5 years to mature. And I discussed it over the period of time in radio interviews and even wrote articles and stuff about it. And it was what I called this context change. And that occurred in the early 2000s. I couldn't figure it out. I just knew there was something big coming. We were all going to reel under it, but I couldn't get a handle around it linguistically. But it was going to change the context around a lot of words that we ended up using. Long story short, it turned out to be the undocumented workers coming out and saying, we're here, we're not going to go away, you got to deal with us. Basically, you've got to change your context of thinking and deal with us as real humans in the here and now, not gloss us over with all of this paper illusion, so to speak, that we don't exist. And so that context changed for USA POP. That's a huge mass of population, 350 million people. And their mental structures, whether they were an undocumented worker or not, they all had to change. We all had to reshape our thoughts around that language to embrace what had just happened. This context changed. In our data sets, it ran 18 months before I talked about it, and then I talked about it for probably another 18 months before the first parts of it matured. We're in the midst of one of those right now. Only it started way back before I even started this work, probably.
With Antarctica, with all, the president going down there, Kerry going down there, other dignitaries going to Antarctica. All of a sudden, everybody's going to Antarctica. Bizarre. And you think it has something to do with this big change in thinking about who we are, where we came from, and what technology is really available to us that's going to be pushed out because we need it now.
Correct.
Oh boy,
it's spooky. It's weird. It's science fiction. It's woo-woo. And there is detail like you wouldn't believe. There was so much stuff about Antarctica, I got sick about looking at it in the data. And it's just going to get bigger.
In other words, you're talking about times when Antarctica, they have maps in the 1500s where they drew Antarctica with no ice on it.
Correct.
And so, Antarctica is a huge continent, and there's a lot of history there, evidently, that's been covered up with 3 miles of ice.
And there's cities underneath. Right now, there's giant voids in there that are so tall that you can stack the Eiffel Tower on top of itself 3 and 4 and 5 times and not even touch the top of this void. These voids run over long rivers. The rivers are at 60 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit temperature, and they've melted the ice and created these giant warm air-filled pockets that run throughout all of Antarctica. They're just now talking about them.
You think there are people living there, or aliens, or somebody?
Something. There's old civilization down there. There's stuff that's been under the ice that is showing up in our data sets as affecting our technological future. Basically, from 2017 onward, we're seeing this stuff leak out. Now, in our language, we have a lot of release language now about Antarctica, in the sense we've got a lot of people wondering, basically, as we just said, why Kerry? Why did the popes go down there? Why did Obama go to Patagonia and then sneak over there? Why are all these people going to Australia and then sneaking over to Antarctica? what possible reason could Obama have to go and look at ice in Antarctica? He knows what ice is like. He swirls it around in his drinks. He's from Hawaii. He's just not the extreme sport loving fellow. And even Kerry, who rides a bicycle and, that kind of thing and does at least exercise at a serious level, he's not your extreme sport, let's go out and climb mountains for the fun of it kind of a guy. So why did he go there on the critical day for his party's election? That kind of thing. So it gets really spooky when you start reading our reports. So if you're going to buy our report and you're going to think it's all about the economics of it, at one level you're correct, because that affects all of us. We're all living in a depression. But also there's this whole woo-woo component that's really bubbling to the surface. Now, part of this is, I was just going to bring this up. It's going to sound really strange, but if you're as old as I am, you remember this movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yes, Hal.
Correct. But all of that, forget all about that. Go back to the beginning of the movie that wasn't the ape man. Okay. It was these people that were digging up a obelisk.
What are they? Have a look at that. Here's what started the whole thing.
Well, when we first found it, we thought it might be an outcrop of magnetic rock, but all the geological evidence was against it. And not even a big nickel iron meteorite could produce a field as intense as this. So we decided to have a look.
We thought it might be the upper part of some buried structure, so we excavated out on all sides, but unfortunately we didn't find anything else.
And what's more, the evidence seems pretty conclusive that it hasn't been covered up by natural erosion or other forces. It seems to have been deliberately buried.
Deliberately buried.
Well, how about a little coffee?
Oh, great.
Good idea.
I don't suppose you have any idea what the damn thing is, huh?
Wish the hell we did. No, the only thing we're sure of is it was buried 4 million years ago.
Well, I must say, you guys have certainly come up with something.
It's just outside.
And we see the obelisk on Earth, and then with the 8 people, and then we see them digging it up on the moon. Excuse me. What we're getting now is data sets that would basically describe people digging something up in Antarctica that is solar system effective, so to speak, solar system involving, and in order, so we're not even really getting the pictures of the people digging in terms of the descriptions. What we're getting is descriptions about the massive logistic effort that's going to take greater than 10 years to do to build out bases in Antarctica and Patagonia to get down into Antarctica to start getting the wealth out of whatever it is they've found. We've got data sets in there that are suggesting, and it can be totally wrong, can be totally screwed, okay? Very rarely has that happened, but it did occur once. But we could be really wrong on this, but the data sets are suggesting that whatever the discovery is down there is going to be a source of wealth for the greater part of humanity for perhaps hundreds of years. So a staggering kind of a find. And we're not talking about a big patch of oil. We're not talking about a resource in the sense of a big chunk of gold. The data sets have actually described this stuff as not precious metals, but precious technology.
And I want to close because I want people to buy a report because I don't want to keep you on too much longer. I do want people to buy a report. Get that in a minute. What about the war card? And your report is huge, and we're just really glancing over the surface. What about the war card? Are you seeing anything on war with this most recent set of data?
Yes, we are, but not as you anticipate. The war that we're seeing described is more of a war between clashing elites and not so much clashing soldiers on the ground at the behest of those elites. So the war could be described as a political battle between existent power cliques or power clubs, and it's going to get really bloody and nasty and so on. But in the sense of, we don't have anything that says that Russia's going to lob nukes at us. We don't have anything that says that the United States is going to be super aggressive. As a matter of fact, we actually have stuff that suggests that the United States is going to run into an economic problem this year or into 2018 that's going to be so severe that the issue of base closings is going to come up in a way that it used to be felt in, say, the 50s, when the U.S. Army tried to close bases down after World War II and consolidate and save money. It would cause huge amounts of angst in local communities as they saw their primary source of income going away. We have that huge amounts of angst language showing now, but around the whole planet as the United States contracts due to what's going on to the economics. So we don't have language that says we have the economics to support war.
Oh, okay. With that, I'm going to leave it because I want people to buy a report. And you can go on halfpasthuman.com and you can scroll down. I put a link up to your buying page, but that link usually gets destroyed for some reason to your page. But you can just go on halfpasthuman.com, scroll down, and buy the most recent report. It's only $15. Is that what this report is? $15?
Correct.
And how many pages is it?
45, yeah.
40? Man, that is I'm not trying to sell stuff for you, and I'm under no obligation to say this. That sounds like a deal to me.
It's a pretty sweet deal for a view of the future, and if even a third of the stuff came out, there's actionable material in there for you. So, yeah. Okay,
well, listen, Clif High, halfpasthuman.com. Thank you for being our first guest of 2017.
Thank you, sir.
First guest, my friend. You killed it. You absolutely killed it dead. Halfpasthuman.com, Clif High. Thank you very much. Go to his page, scroll down. You can buy his report. Thanks a lot, Clif. We'll see you in the next few months.
Thank you much.
You can fly across the North Pole and drink a cocktail at the same time. Yet only 30 or more years ago, about 35 years ago, our guest tonight found out whether there was any land north of the North American continent. He made that first discovery flight, and I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States, that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
This is a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
Admiral, do you hope to see that?
I do.
Well, Admiral,
Yeah.
would you say that since you've been to both the extremities of Earth, are these expeditions to such far-off places, are they getting easier because of modern techniques, or is danger still close at hand?
Well, it's a little risky, but nothing like it used to be with the old slow planes and the small cruising radius where we had to put down bases. We replaced the dog teams, and of course that was a big improvement. But now the planes go much faster and they are safer and they have a much bigger cruising radius. You haven't got the danger of a terribly heavy load.
Admiral, an expedition to which I believe you're the advisor is now en route. What is that expedition doing?
Well, that's the icebreaker Atka, and it's a reconnaissance expedition. It's going down to the South Pole area to make certain observations and to look for some bases. They will be back in April, and they will report back, and upon the information we get from that undertaking, we will base the bigger expedition that's to follow.
Is that very definitely planned, or is that...
That is being planned right now. So I'm willing to say to you that there will be a number of expeditions that will follow, I think, year after year, at the bottom of the world, because the government has really become interested.
Well, Admiral Byrd, I can understand, I think everybody can, the interest in the North Pole because it's so near our greatest challenger, Soviet Russia, but why this interest in the bottom of the world? Nobody living down there, is there?
No, it's pretty cold. There's only one permanent resident, that's the emperor penguin. The little ones live further north. I tell you one reason they're interested. It's by far the most valuable, important place left in the world for science. That's why the scientific groups all over the nation are really interested. But more important than that, it has to do with the future of the nation, those to come after us, or even during your lifetime, because it happens to be an untouched reservoir of natural resources. And you know, as the world shrinks with an ever-increasing acceleration, far-flung places, once useless, like we thought the North Pole was, and no man's land, become very useful. The bottom of the world will be important, not only to us, but to our allies.
I was going to ask you, does it have military importance?
It has some, and as the world shrinks, it will continue to shrink with an ever-increasing acceleration, thus bringing these places closer. And in the future, I can see a time when it will be very, very important strategically.
Well, has the development of air power increased the strategic importance of places like the
oh, very much
Parma
so.
Peninsula, was it?
Very much so. Even now, if anything happened and we lost the Panama Canal, we would have to control the islands just north of Antarctica, which are part of Antarctica, and between there and Cape Horn.
I've heard it said that there are 7 continents in the world, and one of them has never been seen by a woman, and that's Antarctica. Is that actually true?
Well, if the Parma Peninsula is an island, as far as I know, that's true. No woman's ever stepped foot upon the Antarctic continent, and it's the most peaceful place in the world.
Well, I'm sure that won't last very long. I understand now that you're working with the Arnold Bread Company in charge of frozen foods. Now, is there any future for frozen foods down these frozen extremities?
Well, I think the human race can be helped by that. This was thought out by Dean Arnold, who's, in my opinion, a great humanitarian. He learned that we went down there after 4 or 5 years and finished a meal that we had left there on the table when we had evacuated Little America. Everything was perfect, including the bread. So he got the idea of this frozen bread, and already he sent some to Europe, and it worked very well over there for some of the starving people.
That's
So you can store it down in the Antarctic, and against the lean years, and you wouldn't have any people in the world really starving if you did that.
Yes, in the event of an atomic war...
You'd stay there forever.
Admiral, you speak of the resources of Antarctica. What are they? What are the natural resources there?
Well, we've found enough of coal within 180 miles of the South Pole in a great ridge of mountains. It's not covered with snow, enough to supply the whole world for quite a while.
Well,
that's the coal. Now, there's evidence of many other minerals. We are pretty sure there's oil. Now, that coal shows the bottom of the world. Now, by far the coldest spot in the world. Where that coal is gets 100 below zero in the winter.
well,
It was once tropical. So we think there's oil there, and there's evidence, probably uranium there.
is it any secret? Is there uranium there? That would be the only thing that would be practical to actually go after, I suppose. Everything else would be economically unfeasible, wouldn't it?
Well, as we recklessly expend our resources, the time will come when we'll have to go after that stuff down there.
Well,
you know, I avoided what you said about uranium. I'm not sure about that. I don't want to have the world fighting over the Antarctica.
Admiral, is there a competition among other nations to try to get information about Antarctica and possibly to secure some of these resources?
Well, yes. There are now 7 nations very much interested. Russia is interested tremendously. That I'm sure of. Australia has an expedition down there. The Argentine, the Chile, New Zealand, Britain, and so on. Now, you can understand those people down there being interested because they live down there, the New Zealanders, the Argentinians, the Chileans, and Australians. And so we don't do much about claiming anything.
Admiral, you make this sound a little crowded. Are there that many expeditions now there or en route there?
Well, you know, as I said, it's the most peaceful place in the world, but I don't think it will be for long because of this intense interest on the part of other nations and this nation.
Well, Admiral Byrd, are private expeditions a thing of the past? Is expedition and exploration, making expedition and exploration now purely a government function because of the tremendous cost and organization?
No, I don't think so. I think down south it may be more or less a thing of the past, but not other expeditions that go there. A lot of them go north now.
This latest expedition now on the way is a government expedition, I take it.
Yes, that's the government.
Admiral Byrd, may I ask you, is there a great difference between the top of the world and the bottom of the world?
There is. Now, the North Pole is the center of an ocean 10,000 feet deep. The South Pole, the center of a plateau, 10,000 feet high. The North Polar Sea is surrounded by continents that are slightly frozen. The Antarctic continent is surrounded by a belt of ice, frozen seas of at least 1,200 miles thick. Now, the South is a plateau. It gets, in some places, 14,000 feet up. I've been over areas about 13,000, and it's a little bit chilly up there. So there's that big difference between the top and bottom of the world. The North really isn't very cold up there on the Arctic Ocean.
Not compared to the South. Admiral Byrd, we often hear it said that our young Americans now aren't as hardy as their forefathers. Do you think that Americans do measure up to the standards, the physical standards and morale standards of the past?
I do. I don't believe that. I think they're just as hardy.
Well, what would you say was the most valuable factor on an expedition? Is it morale, or physical courage, or is it sheer equipment?
Well, I've always thought that loyalty was by far the most important trait. The British told me that when I first went down in 28, that I couldn't possibly get through the winter night without a mutiny if I took more than 20 men. But to serve science, I had to take 42 men. Then I took 56 the next time, and so on. So, and I did find that loyalty was the most important thing during the winter night when it's very hard on your nerves. I think that's best trait.
Well, that's a very valuable characteristic at any time. Well, thank you very much, Admiral Byrd. It's been a great pleasure to have you here tonight.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
The opinion